My name is Taylor, and I am 29. The jazz playlist I had curated for the cocktail hour was drifting through the speakers, a slow, heavy saxophone that sounded expensive. On my second monitor, the mood board glowed with that specific shade of rustic chic, amber my mother insisted on. I could almost smell the imported peonies I had just wired the deposit for, the sharp, metallic scent of $14,000 finally finding its purpose. It was the quiet satisfaction of a spreadsheet where every column balances, the way order hangs in the air when you have engineered a perfect moment. And then a notification slid across the screen. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I want to know who is awake with me. I did not close the email. I just let it sit there on the screen, glowing in the late afternoon light. My mother's words, "You wouldn't be comfortable," stared back at me. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. It framed my exclusion as an act of mercy, as if she were doing me a favor by sparing me the awkwardness of ruining her photos. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair and looked around my home office. It was clean, organized, functional. Just like me, I was the logistics specialist, the fixer, the one who made problems disappear before anyone else even noticed them. And for the last decade, my biggest project had not been shipping routes or supply chain management. It had been my family. I opened a new spreadsheet. I needed to see it. I needed to see the data. I started typing, my fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. Item 1. The venue deposit. $14,500 wired directly from my personal savings because my father, Brian, said his liquidity was tied up in the business. Item 2. The live jazz band. $3,000, non-refundable, because my mother insisted recorded music was tacky. Item 3. The imported peonies. $2,800, because they had to be flown and out of season to match the color palette of the napkins. I kept typing. The numbers scrolled down the screen, a waterfall of financial devotion. But it was not just the wedding. I added a new tab. Last winter, when their HVAC system failed during the polar vortex, who called the emergency repair service at 2 a.m? Who paid the $4,200 bill because they did not have an emergency fund?
Me.
Who spent 3 weekends migrating their small business accounting to the cloud because they were still using paper ledgers from 1995?
Me.
Who managed their passwords, their doctor appointments, their tax filings? Who was the chief operating officer of their entire chaotic, comfortable lives?
Me.
I looked at the total at the bottom of the column. It was a staggering number. A down payment on a house. A year of travel. A freedom fund I had liquidated, dollar by dollar, to buy my seat at their table. And now, looking at that email, I realized the truth. I had not been buying a seat. I had been paying rent. For years, I told myself I was generous. I told myself I was the responsible one, the good daughter who took care of her family because she could. But that was a lie. I was not being generous. I was being extorted. I had been conditioned since childhood to believe that my utility was the only currency accepted in this house. My brother, Ryan, did not have to fix the Wi-Fi to be loved. He did not have to wire thousands of dollars to be invited to dinner. He just had to show up. He had the vibe. He fit the aesthetic. He was the golden child, charming and helpless, and his helplessness was endearing to them. My competence was expected.
It was the baseline.
It was the rent I paid to exist in their orbit. I thought about the trap of normalization. I had read about it once. It is when you live in a situation so toxic, so transactional, that you stop seeing the price tag attached to every interaction. You think it is normal to buy your mother's affection with tech support. You think it is normal to buy your father's respect with bailouts. You normalize the transaction because the alternative, admitting that your parents only love you when you are useful, is too painful to bear.
But the pain was not what I felt right now.
What I felt was clarity. A cold, sharp, binary clarity. They did not want me there because I did not fit the picture. I was not rustic chic. I was efficient. I was modern. I was the person who made things work, not the person who looked good in a sepia-toned Instagram post. They wanted the event I paid for, but they did not want the reminder of who paid for it. They wanted the luxury, without the logistics. They wanted the magic without the magician. I looked at the clock. It was 5:15. The banks were closed, but the online portals were open. I did not cry. I did not call my best friend to sob about how unfair it was. I did not draft a long, emotional reply to my mother begging her to reconsider. I simply opened the vendor contract folder on my desktop. I found the file labeled Lodge Agreement Final. I scrolled to page 14, paragraph 3. The force majeure clause. I had negotiated it myself. It allowed for cancellation without penalty in the event of a fundamental breach of terms or unforeseen circumstances preventing the host's attendance. Well, the host had just been banned from the premises. I would say that counted as an unforeseen circumstance. I cracked my knuckles. The sadness was gone, replaced by the low, steady hum of an engine coming online. If they wanted to curate their lives so carefully, I would help them. I would help them curate a life that was exactly as empty as their bank accounts would be without me. I clicked Edit. And then I began to type. The cursor hovered over the Submit Request button. It was not a request. It was an execution. I typed the explanation into the required field. Contract holder excluded from event. Funding withdrawn. Please process refund to original payment method immediately. I did not feel guilty. I did not feel like the bad guy. I felt like a bank processing a foreclosure. They had defaulted on the terms of our relationship, and I was simply collecting the collateral. I clicked Submit. The screen refreshed. The status bar changed from green confirmed to red canceled, pending refund. Just like that, the rustic chic aesthetic evaporated. The imported peonies, the live jazz band, the venue gone. $14,500 was on its way back to my account. But I was not done. The wedding was just a party. Their lives, their actual day-to-day existence, ran on infrastructure I had built, maintained, and paid for. If I was too aesthetic to be seen in family photos, I was certainly too aesthetic to run their back-end operations. I opened a new browser window. I logged into the administrative panel for my parents' small business. It was a boutique home goods store that they liked to pretend they ran by themselves. The truth was, I managed the inventory system, the payroll software, and the cloud storage from my living room. I navigated to the User Management tab. There they were, Brian and Susan, listed as standard users. I was the root administrator. It was a hierarchy they had never questioned because it meant they did not have to learn how two-factor authentication worked. I clicked Edit on my father's profile. I revoked his access token. I did the same for my mother. Then I moved to the smart home security system. I had installed it 3 years ago after breaking down the street. It controlled their locks, their cameras, their thermostat. I reset the master password. I removed their devices from the authorized list. I was not locking them out of their house. They still had physical keys if they could find them, but I was locking them out of the convenience I provided. Finally, I went to the family cellular plan. The one I paid for because bundling is cheaper, Taylor. I transferred my line to a new, individual account. I left theirs on the old one, but I removed the autopay information. They would get a notification in 30 days when the bill was overdue. It took exactly 12 minutes. 12 minutes to dismantle a decade of invisible labor. I watched the progress bars complete. Access revoked. Password reset. Device removed. One by one, the digital lights went out on their comfortable, curated lives. They wanted a life that looked good in pictures? Fine. Now they had one. But the engine that made that life run had just resigned. I closed my laptop. The silence in my apartment was heavy, but it was not lonely. It was the sound of a machine shutting down. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window, watching the streetlights flick on outside. I knew what was coming next. The confusion, the panic, the realization that without me, they were just two people standing in the dark, holding a canceled contract and a phone that could not connect to the internet. The storm was coming, but for the first time in my life, I was not the one who would get wet. It started with a text from my brother, Ryan. Not a hello or how are you? Just yo, the Netflix password isn't working. I stared at it, marveling at the audacity. I had just canceled a $14,000 event, and his first concern was access to his streaming queue. I did not reply. 5 minutes later, the real panic set in. My phone buzzed. It was my mother, then my father, then Aunt Karen. I silenced them all, flipping my phone face down on the coffee table. I poured myself another glass of water and watched the notifications stack up on the lock screen like a digital pileup. Taylor, why can't I log into the store inventory? The alarm system is beeping and won't stop. Did you change the bank login? We need to pay a vendor. The lodge just called. They said the event is canceled? Call me immediately. They were not hurt. They were not heartbroken that their daughter felt excluded. They were inconvenienced. They were panicking because the help had stopped working. It was like watching a car engine seize up because someone finally stopped pouring oil into it. I thought about the concept of narcissistic injury. I had read about it in a psychology book I bought years ago, trying to understand why my parents only seemed to see me when I was fixing something. The book said that for some people, their self-worth is entirely external. It is built on status, on appearance, on the admiration of others. But that status is fragile. It requires constant maintenance. And in my family, I was the maintenance crew. I was the one who kept the facade polished. My parents did not own their successful small business lifestyle. They leased it. They leased it with my competence. They leased it with my free labor. They leased it with my ability to navigate a digital world that terrified them. Without me, they were not the successful business owners hosting a rustic chic vow renewal. They were two technophobes locked out of their own cash register, standing in a house with an alarm they could not turn off. Their panic was not about missing me. It was about the sudden, terrifying realization that their wallet was empty. Not of money, though that would come later, but of capability. The buzzing stopped for a moment, then started again with renewed fury. Aunt Karen sent a text. You are ruining your mother's big day over a misunderstanding? This is incredibly selfish, Taylor. Fix this. Fix this. That was the command. Not we're sorry. Not let's talk. Just a support ticket issued to the IT department they had just fired. They genuinely believed that if they yelled loud enough, the system would reboot. They believed that my role was so fundamental, so immutable, that I could not possibly just walk away. But I was not walking away. I was already gone. I watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across my living room. I thought about the empty wallet metaphor again. They had spent years treating me like a limitless resource, like a credit card with no limit. They had swiped and swiped, confident that the bill would never come due. But the bill had arrived, and the account was closed. The system failure was not a glitch. It was the new operating system. And they were just beginning to realize that they did not have the password. The next morning, I did something I should have done years ago. I called in a professional. I needed to ensure my deposit refund would not be contested in small claims court, so I reached out to Chloe, my cousin, and a brilliant real estate attorney. She agreed to review the venue contract over lunch. We met at a deli near her office. I slid the paperwork across the table, along with a printout of the cancellation confirmation. Chloe scanned the documents quickly, nodding. This is airtight, she said. The force majeure clause covers you completely. But Taylor, are you sure about this? Once the money is gone, they're going to come after you for breach of, well, family contract. I am sure, I said. But I need you to check something else. I am worried they might try to claim I owe them money for the business support I provided. I want to make sure my assets are separated from theirs. Chloe frowned. I can do a quick public record search. It will show any liens or shared liabilities. She pulled out her laptop and logged into the county clerk's database. I watched her type, sipping my iced tea, feeling a strange sense of calm. I was finally treating my life like a business, protecting my interests instead of theirs. Chloe's typing stopped abruptly. She squinted at the screen. Taylor, she said slowly. Did you know your parents filed a deed transfer application 3 weeks ago?
No, I said.
What property? The lake house, she said. They are transferring the title to Ryan. The world tilted. The lake house. My grandfather's cabin. The place where I had spent every summer of my childhood. The place I had spent 3 months renovating last year, sanding the floors, painting the walls, fixing the dock, because my father said he was too old for the upkeep. They had told me it would be a family legacy, a place for all of us. And now they were giving it to Ryan. Ryan, who had not visited in 5 years because nature isn't his thing. Ryan, who had never lifted a hammer in his life. When is the transfer effective? I asked, my voice hollow.
It is pending, Chloe said.
Scheduled to be finalized next Monday. Next Monday. The day after the vow renewal. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. The vow renewal was not just a party. It was a cover event. They were going to use the gathering I paid for, to announce the transfer. They were going to stand in front of our friends and family, raise a glass of champagne paid for by me, and gift my brother the one thing I had poured my sweat and soul into. It was not just exclusion. It was theft. Theft of my labor. Theft of my money. Theft of my birthright. They had used me to fund the celebration of my own disinheritance. The aesthetic excuse was not just about photos. It was about making sure I was not there to object. It was about silencing the only person who knew the true cost of that property. I looked at Chloe. Print it, I said. Print the application. Print the draft deed. Print everything. She nodded, her face grim. Taylor, this is cruel. No, I said, taking the papers she handed me. This is business. And I just got the audit report. I walked out of the deli with the envelope in my hand. The anger I felt was not hot anymore. It was absolute zero. They wanted to talk about value? They wanted to talk about who deserved what.
Fine.
I had the receipts. And I was about to deliver the final invoice. My father arrived at 7:14 in the evening. He did not call first. He did not text. He just drove across the city in rush hour traffic, fueled by the kind of righteous indignation that only a mediocre man losing control can muster. I heard his heavy footsteps in the hallway before he even reached my unit. Then came the pounding. It was not a knock, it was a demand. It was the sound of a landlord coming to collect rent, not a father coming to see his daughter. I stood in the middle of my living room, smoothing the paper in my hand. It was the printout Chloe had given me, the deed transfer application, warm from the printer. I took a deep breath. My heart was not racing. My hands were not shaking. I felt a strange, icy stillness, like the air before a snowstorm. I opened the door. Brian stood there, red-faced, his fist raised to pound again. He looked disheveled, a stark contrast to the composed patriarch he liked to play in public. As soon as he saw me, the dam broke. He did not say hello. He did not ask if I was okay. He just started shouting about cancellation fees. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" he yelled, his voice echoing off the corridor walls. "The lodge is keeping 20%. The caterer is threatening to sue. You have humiliated your mother. You have destroyed a family milestone over a temper tantrum." I let him finish. I let him run out of steam. I watched him pant, waiting for me to apologize, waiting for me to shrink back into the dutiful daughter who fixed the Wi-Fi and paid the bills. When he finally stopped to take a breath, I did not offer an excuse. I did not talk about the email or the exclusion. I simply held out the paper. "What is this?" he snapped, snatching it from my hand. He squinted at it, his eyes scanning the legal jargon. I watched the recognition hit him. I saw his shoulders stiffen. I saw the color drain from his angry face. It was the draft deed transferring the lake house, the house I had spent my summer sanding and painting, to my brother, Ryan. Was this going to be the toast? I asked. My voice was quiet, steady. After the jazz band started? After the champagne I paid for was poured? Were you going to announce that you were giving the only tangible family asset to the son who hasn't visited in 5 years? He looked up, and for a second he looked trapped. Then the deflection started. The gaslighting. It was a familiar dance. "It is complicated, Taylor," he stammered. "You don't understand the estate planning implications. Ryan needs the help. He has had a hard year. He needs a leg up." Then he looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to be the bigger person one last time. You are independent. You have a career. You have savings. You don't need the house. We knew you could handle it. There it was. The tax on competence. Because I was strong, I deserved nothing. Because Ryan was weak, he deserved everything. I had been punished for my success my entire life, forced to subsidize my own erasure. But this was the end of the subsidy. I am not mad that you gave him the house, I said, cutting through his excuses. It is your property. You can burn it down for all I care. I am mad that you tried to make me pay for the party where you planned to steal from me. You wanted me to fund the celebration of my own disinheritance. That isn't family, Dad. That's fraud. Taylor, please, he said, stepping forward, trying to leverage the physical intimidation that used to work when I was a child. We can fix this. Unfreeze the accounts. We will talk about the house later. Don't do this to us. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike, the man who had let me pay his mortgage when cash was tight, the man who had decided I was not aesthetic enough for his photos. I did not see a father anymore. I saw a bad investment. I saw a liability I needed to liquidate. I am not doing anything to you, I said. I am just matching your energy. I stepped back, preparing to close the door. He reached out, desperate now. You can't just cut us off. We are your family. I looked him dead in the eye. I summoned the exact words his wife had sent me 48 hours ago. The words that had started this war. It's not personal, Dad, I said, my voice flat and final. I just wouldn't be comfortable around you anymore. I did not slam the door. I closed it gently, firmly, with a decisive click that echoed in the silence. I heard him stand there for a moment, breathing hard on the other side of the wood. Then, finally, I heard his footsteps retreat down the hall. I locked the deadbolt. And then I went to the kitchen and made myself dinner. The weeks that followed were quiet. Not the tense, angry silence of a fight, but the hollow, echoing silence of an empty room. I did not block their numbers. I just stopped answering. I watched the fallout from a distance, like observing a car crash in slow motion through a telescope. The vow renewal date came and went. There were no photos, no rustic chic table settings, no jazz band, just a quiet cancellation that rippled through our social circle, raising eyebrows and questions my parents refused to answer. Without my free labor, their business began to crumble. They missed a tax deadline because I was not there to file the extension. Their inventory system crashed during a sale, and they had to close for 3 days because they could not afford the emergency IT rates I had saved them from paying for years. The stress compounded. The house, the big, impressive house they had leveraged to maintain their image, started to show its cracks. The landscaping grew wild. The repairs piled up. Eventually, they had to sell. They downsized to a condo across town, selling the business to a competitor for a fraction of what it was worth. Ryan was furious. He had lost the lake house before he even got the keys because it had to be liquidated to cover their debts. He sent me one long, venomous email accusing me of destroying his inheritance. I did not reply. I just moved it to a folder labeled Archive and closed the tab. I realized then that I had not destroyed anything. I had simply stopped propping it up. Their lifestyle, their status, their comfort, it was all a structure built on my back. When I walked away, gravity did the rest. They did not lose a daughter, they lost a support beam. And without it, the roof caved in. I moved too. I found a new apartment in the city. It was not rustic. It was not chic. It was modern, clean, and filled with light. I bought furniture that I liked. I spent my weekends hiking, reading, and doing absolutely nothing for anyone else. I paid my own bills. I solved my own problems. I found peace in the autonomy I had fought so hard to reclaim. Sometimes, late at night, I still felt the phantom limb of my family. I missed the idea of them. I missed the version of parents I wished I had, the ones who would have been proud of my strength, not threatened by it. But then I would look around my quiet, peaceful home, and I would remember the price of their love. It was a price I could no longer afford to pay. There is a letter I wrote in my head 1,000 times, but never sent. It goes like this: to the invisible child. To the one who holds the glue gun, the checkbook, and the secrets. To the one who fixes the Wi-Fi and pays the bill and smooths over the cracks so no one else has to see them. Put it down. You are allowed to resign. You are allowed to be aesthetic enough to be in the photo, or you are allowed to walk away from the photo shoot entirely. Your utility is not your rent. Your competence is not your currency. You are enough, just as you are, standing in the center of your own life. If you have ever had to buy your own seat at the family table, hit share. Let's remind each other that we are enough.